This is the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE, Samsung's latest S-series phone.
But on a budget. What's up everyone, I'm your tech and photo enthusiast, and today we're going to be talking about the Samsung Galaxy S23 FE, and is it worth it? I mean, it's a budget phone, but it's a premium phone. Which one is it? Is it both? Let's find out. Starting off, you get a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 SoC, which is a flagship SoC from just 2 years ago. But you also get 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage at the base model. Unfortunately, it tops off at just 256 gigs of storage, and you still get 8 gigs of RAM with that, so you can get more performance if you get more storage. But it's not as bad as it sounds. The phone still has plenty of power. I mean, I was able to run Genshin Impact at high settings and full speed, and I was also able to emulate God of War 2 on the PS2 emulator at 2x resolution, running at full speed as well. The phone has plenty of power to run pretty much any of your modern games. Above that, the games look pretty great, especially on the 6.4-inch AMOLED display with a rather odd resolution of 1080 by 2340, which is basically 1080p, just slightly wider. Now, you might be wondering, isn't 1080p a little old by now? And it is, but let's be real, unless you put it side by side with a higher resolution display, you're not gonna be able to tell the difference. And having a 1080p actually helps save battery life. On the bright side, the screen does have a peak brightness of 1450 nits and supports a refresh rate of 120 Hz, while also able to go down to 60 Hz in order to preserve battery. However, it can't go any lower than 60 Hz, but I mean, hey, 60 Hz never stopped anyone from subscribing to this channel, which you should do. Comment below what refresh rate you use to subscribe to this channel. And while you're at it, hit the like button. Thank you. Below the screen, we have the front 10 megapixel selfie camera at the top with a rather interesting silver ring around it. However, the ring is barely noticeable once the screen's turned on, so that's kind of odd. Now, going down, we have an optical fingerprint scanner, and it's okay. It's rather speedy, but I did need to hold my finger down a little bit longer than I would have liked. And it's also placed a little lower on the screen than I would have liked, but that's nothing somebody can't get used to. Moving on to the battery, the S23 FU does have a 4500 milliamp hour battery, which should last all day given the specs of the phone. And if that's not enough, it does support 25 watts fast charging to help minimize your time tethered to the wall. It also supports wireless charging, which is nice to see on the phone, and reverse wireless charging in case you need to charge something in a pinch, like your wireless headphones. Now, how well are the cameras on the phone? Well, you get a 10 megapixel front-facing camera for the selfies. You get 12 megapixels on the ultra-wide camera on the back, 50 megapixel on the main 1x camera, and an 8 megapixel 3x telephoto camera. How well are they? Well, I got my laptop here in front of me, so we're gonna review it and also compare the photos to a $1,200 S23 Ultra, see how they compare. Okay, starting off with some selfies. The S23 FE is on the left, as noted on top, and then the S23 Ultra is on the right. Both phones were set to auto. I did not do any editing. I didn't bother even changing settings within the phone. Now, to start off, I took a photo in a dark environment. I was outside at night, and then I was also backlit to make it a little more of a challenging situation for the phones. Now, you could see on the S23 Ultra, my skin tones to me look a lot more true to life and natural, while on the S23 FE, my face kind of has that yellow-green hue coming from the backlit lights. And then on the S23 Ultra, the color of my jacket is also more true to life, while on the S23 FE, it looks like it also got some of those green-yellow hues. And then on top of that, this may be because it's a lower resolution sensor for the front camera, but I've also noticed some extra noise on the jacket compared to the S23 Ultra, especially in this area. Now, something I should note is on the S23 FE, I accidentally left Scene Optimizer turned on, while on the S23 Ultra, it was turned off. So what Scene Optimizer does is it basically will scan whatever photo you take, and if it detects, let's say, trees or leaves and grass, it'll make them more green. It'll make dark areas a little brighter and a more HDR looking effect. So you will see that in some of the other photos. I'm not sure if the differences we're seeing in these photos is due to Scene Optimizer, but regardless, I mean, quite honestly, even with the lower quality S23 FE photo on the selfie here, I am very happy with what it turned out. And quite honestly, I would never know that this is a phone that's like half the price of the S23 Ultra. Moving on to the next image, we have another selfie. This time I was at a more dimly lit banquet hall, and I decided to see how well does it do with all of these colors in the photo. And quite honestly, I mean, between the two images, they are almost indistinguishable. If I was to remove the title at the top, I bet you would have no idea which phone took which, unless you really know what you're looking for. I mean, for example, you can kind of see a lot more details around my facial hair area that I had just recently shaved off that day. And I mean, the jacket does look a little cleaner on the Ultra than the FE, but overall, I mean, the colors, the clarity, everything is pretty good between the two images, almost indistinguishable, which is very, very impressive. Now we switched over to the main camera. This was in a little bakery in downtown Birmingham. And basically, once again, between the two images, unless you really know what you're looking for, it's very hard to tell the difference. I mean, these are two really good looking images. They're very well true to life. Everything came out pretty good. The main differences, I mean, it's pretty obvious when you zoom in on both images, especially if I go to 200% on both over here. It's pretty obvious that the S23 Ultra is sharper, considering it's a bin down 200 megapixel image, while this is a 50 megapixel image bin down. But it also looks like the S23 Ultra has some artificial sharpening going on, and not just that the image is sharper. Meanwhile, the S23 FE, personally, as a photographer, looks like it's more natural rather than over sharpened and over processed. And it's even more noticeable here in the corner when you look at the paint brushes. You can see all the paint strokes and all of that from the paintbrush in the corner here on the S23 Ultra. But on the S23 FE, it kind of all blends in. So I don't know if that's some artificial smoothing going on, or if the S23 Ultra is just that much sharper, which most likely that's the case. Now, this one was a very interesting result to me, and I don't know if this is due to Scene Optimizer or not. This is the Birmingham Theater, and this is still taken with the 1X camera on both phones. What's interesting to me is when you look at the doors over here, they look a lot more true to life on the S23 FE. Meanwhile, on the S23 Ultra, they look a little bit blown out. It's almost like the S23 Ultra really raised the shadows, while the S23 FE kept them where they're supposed to be. But then what makes it more interesting is when we move up the Birmingham sign on top, it is clear that the S23 Ultra is a sharper image, especially when you look at the trolls and band together text right here in the center. But then when you look at the Birmingham sign itself, it's like the S23 Ultra reduced the highlights, while the S23 FE kind of kept them where they are or increased them, which is pretty interesting, because especially when you zoom in a lot closer, you can really tell the difference between Birmingham, and you could see the little neon looking sign or lights on the letters compared to the S23 FE. But again, I mean, honestly, if you're looking at these two side by side, I still don't think you would be able to tell which is which unless you really know what you're looking for. They're both very good images, and considering that one of these phones is half the price of the other, I mean, honestly, that is awesome. And then another image here I took, basically just a sidewalk at Birmingham. Most of these images I took are to kind of show off how well do these phones do in very terrible lighting and in worse conditions. And over here again, I mean, we got a dark sky, we got bright trees, dark vehicles, and both phones handled the images very well. You can see the S23 FE is a little softer. It's not as sharp as the S23 Ultra, especially when you look at the guy walking, or even if you look at these lines separating the cement tiles or whatever these are. The LEDs on the tree are a little more, noticeable, while they tend to blend in together on the S23 FE. But again, overall, unless you're like a pixel peeper and you know what you're looking for, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference between these two images if I put them side by side. Now this one for fun, I took a photo of my car. It was a very cloudy day, as you could see, which if any of you are photographers, that's basically our ideal case for taking photos. We love cloudy days, or at least I love cloudy days. I hate sunny days. I mean, be honest with me. Can you tell which vehicle, or not vehicle, but rather which photo is from which camera? Even if I zoom in over here. So I'll tell you what, if you guessed S23 FE for the left, you are correct. But this kind of goes to show you can't tell the difference unless you really know what you're looking for. Now here we have an image to compare the 3x camera on both phones. And one thing to note, the 3x lens on the S23 FE on the left here, it's slightly more zoomed in than the S23 Ultra. The S23 Ultra comes in at about a 70mm equivalent focal length, while the S23 FE comes in at right around a 75mm equivalent lens. I'm not sure why it's slightly more cropped in or why they did that, but that is something to note. Another thing is that the S23 FE struggles here a bit, and it does have an 8-megapixel sensor, so you can really see the difference, especially when you zoom in on these trees. The other thing is that the S23 Ultra's colors are a lot more true to life than the S23 FE. While on the S23 Ultra, I'm not sure if the white balance is better. I mean, you could see the lights are a different color than that of the S23 FE, but it does look like the sidewalk is a lot nicer of a color, a more true to life color than the S23 FE. Overall, I mean, the S23 FE is definitely lacking over here, but it's not the worst photo of them all. Now, coming back to the Birmingham Theater, these were both taken with the 3x camera once again, and you can tell, just like the other one, the S23 FE it's just got that like yellow hue. It's really taking in more light from the ambience, and it's not fixing the white balance as well as the S23 Ultra, especially when you look at these doors over here. It's very yellow here on the S23 FE, but when you look at the S23 Ultra, it looks a little more true to life in terms of the colors. Another interesting thing is when you go to the Birmingham thing on the top, you can really see those like neon lights on the S23 Ultra, but on the FE, they're a lot more blended in and not as like well shown. And you can also see the difference in the text. But keep in mind, the S23 FE has an 8-megapixel 3x camera, while the S23 Ultra has a 10-megapixel 3x camera. Something very interesting with Samsung is when you're using the back cameras, regardless if it's the ultrawide, the main, or the telephoto, they like to have every image output as 12 megapixels, and I don't understand why. So for example, if you look here, this is a 8-megapixel image, but the output, if you look at the resolution, is 12 megapixels. And on the S23 Ultra, this is a 10-megapixel sensor, but it outputs a 12 megapixel image. I don't understand why Samsung does it that way, but they do. Now here we have another photo taken with the ultra-wide camera, and honestly, I can't tell them apart. I can see there's some differences due to seam atomizer, again with the bushes and the dark areas, but overall, they are very, very similar. And if I zoom in on the brick over here, stone I should call it, they are pretty similar. Aside from one being a little brighter than the other, you can barely tell the difference. The Ultra does have some artificial sharpening, it looks like, while the S23 FE looks a little more natural to me. But overall, I mean, zooming out, you can't tell the difference. These are two very good cameras, especially given that this is like perfect lighting conditions. Moving on to the 3X camera once again. Basically, as mentioned before, the S23 FE is slightly cropped in more because it is a slightly more telephoto lens. But again, these two images, they both look great. The Ultra is a little sharper when you zoom in. And it looks like the FE's got a little extra, I guess, artificial sharpening going on this time. But overall, you really can't tell the difference when these are zoomed out. They both look great. And again, it goes to show if you have enough light, you can take great photos. Light is everything. It's not just the camera. How about the video quality? Cameras came out pretty well, but what about the video quality? I'm going to be playing some side-by-side footage of the S23 FE and the S23 Ultra for you guys to review, and then we'll kind of come back and take a look. I'm here in downtown Birmingham in Michigan. It is 27 degrees outside. I'm using both the S23 Ultra and the S23 FE for microphone quality. Right now I am mostly front lit with a tree, but I'm going to be walking and it's going to be now backlit. And that's what I look like. There's also slight wind, so hopefully there's some noise cancellation on the microphone, but we'll kind of see how that works out. See you guys at home. Now, after watching those video clips, quite honestly, the quality between the two was almost indistinguishable. I'm not much of a video nerd, so I can't tell you guys too much about which one did a little better than the other. But overall, I was very happy with the video quality of both, and they were both very similar to one another. And keep in mind, that was in a very, very dark outside area, a very tough situation where you have really bright lights and really dark areas. And overall, I mean, considering that they're smartphones, I think they did pretty well. For $600, these cameras are pretty close to their $1,200 counterpart. That's right, this phone comes in at $600 for the 128 gig model. And just a few weeks after release, it went down to $400. $400. Honestly, at $600, I think this one's pretty decent as it doesn't lack much from the very similarly spec'd S23 Plus, and I would definitely consider this over the smaller S23 unless you really need that extra processing power. But at $400, it's basically as much as Samsung's top A-series phone, and this phone runs laps across those phones. Sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, sound. Let's see how these speakers are. On the left is the S23 FE, and then on the right is the S23 Ultra. Let's give them a listen to. That was pretty good. Honestly, as far as volume goes, I couldn't tell which one was louder. However, I did notice the S23 Ultra did sound a little nicer, but only barely, and certainly not double or triple the price. If sound really matters to you, get a real speaker, please. But as far as volume goes, if the phone goes off, you're gonna hear it from pretty much the same distance you would hear the S23 Ultra. As mentioned earlier, at $600 or even the $400 sale price, the phone has all the stuff you'd find in a premium phone, such as IP68 water resistance, fast charging, wireless charging, Samsung DeX, and the aesthetics of the phone are pretty good too. It's got a nice aluminum body and a glass back, although I did get the graphite color and it looks nothing like the graphite color shown online. It doesn't bother me though, because the phone's gonna live in a case, but something to consider if you are considering the graphite color. Overall, I think it's a pretty nice phone. For the price, I would say if you're someone that wants a premium feeling phone with most of the premium features, but at a price closer to a budget phone, this is it. As long as you don't mind the slightly lower resolution cameras, although they are still pretty good. In my case, my father is a perfect candidate for this phone. He doesn't care too much about camera quality, but he does want a phone that works well and will last long. He doesn't know it yet, and I really hope he doesn't watch this video, or at least this section yet. But Merry Christmas, Dad. I love you, and I hope you really like your new phone, but not as much as your oldest son. As for the rest of you, thank you for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you all in the next one. Please subscribe.